Chodesh Tov Rabotai. Interesting, right? Our friend Boris asked a question yesterday about the ketoret, the incense, right? In the Bet HaMikdash. You know, they say, right, that the ketoret, it had the most beautiful smell. Nothing like it, nothing like that in the world. It was a very special mixture of all kinds of spices, all kinds of herbs that made it like very, very special. And there's also a rule like this, by the way, that you're not allowed to make this kind of ketoret outside the Bet HaMikdash. The same recipe, the same matkon, right? The same proportions. You're not allowed to make this kind of ketoret. You can make a different ketoret. But this one particularly, right, this kind of proportion, these spices, you're not allowed to make it outside because it's only for the Bet HaMikdash. But his question was like this, the question is, do we make a bracha on the ketoret, right? When they do in the Bet HaMikdash, the ketoret. So the truth is, that we shouldn't make a bracha on any ketoret. On any ketoret. Even the one you make in the house, Sometimes they have incense in the house, right? They burn incense, right? All kinds of things like this. So what's the reason why? I'll tell you there's several reasons why we don't make a bracha on the ketoret. Doesn't matter whether it's in the Bet HaMikdash or even outside. In the Bet HaMikdash, there's even more reasons why we don't do. What's the reason why? Number one, right, there's a rule like this, brought down, as we mentioned already yesterday. There's several rules about ketoret. Number one is that you're not allowed to make a bracha on any right, besamim, which is not made for smelling. Understand? So, ketoret is made for smelling or no? No. Why? It's made for mitzvah. Hashem commanded you to do. This is the thing, They didn't make this to smell it. It's not for pleasure. You understand? Mitzvot lo lahana nitnu. Mitzvot were not given for pleasure. So therefore, since it's not made for smelling, it's made for the mitzvah, so therefore you're not allowed to make a bracha on this. Same thing as we said yesterday, right? Lehavdil, about the besamim which is made for the bathroom, and the besamim which is made for the met, for the niftar, for the corpse. We don't make. Why? Because it's not made for smelling. Here also it's not made for smelling. That's reason number one. That we don't bless on the ketoret. Number two, there's also another mitzvah. There's also another reason. The reason is because we said right yesterday that we don't make a bracha on something which has no ikar. So what does that mean? There's no source. So we have to understand, right? What does that mean over here? There's no source. There is a source, right? Ketoret is the source. But here's the thing, right? Ketoret, yes. In other words, if you smell the ketoret itself, there is a source. But when they smoke it, right? When they burn it, that smoke has no source itself. You understand? It doesn't have a source, the smoke. So therefore, right, the smoke is just air. It's just vapors, So it doesn't have a source. And this is also another reason why we don't bless on ketoret. So this is the reason why we don't bless on any ketoret. Even the one you make in the house. Why? Because it has no source. So what does that mean? If you smell the besamim itself, you make a bracha. But not on the smoke, which comes from the besamim. Because that has no source. It has no ikar. That's also reason number two, right? We don't bless on any ketoret.
So similar thing.
Yeah.
If I'm making shish kebab.
You're right. Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Also because it's not made for smelling, That's also another reason. But here's the thing, right? There's also a third reason why. According to some chachamim that I saw, right? They write, because of me'ilah. Right? There's an isur of me'ilah. There's a sin of me'ilah. What does that mean, me'ilah? A person uses the Bet HaMikdash, something over there, for his own personal use. You're not allowed to use for personal use things that are which on the Bet HaMikdash. For the avodah of Hashem. So if a person does that, he takes that, utensil or whatever, right? Some kind of item which is in the Bet HaMikdash, and he uses it for personal use. He's over it on me'ilah. He's mo'el. Understand? That's also another reason why. So there's reason number three, right? Because of me'ilah. You're not allowed to use it for your personal pleasure. Not something from the Bet HaMikdash. So therefore, that's also reason number three. So because of all these reasons, right? The rule is that on ketoret we don't bless. Even the ketoret in the house we don't bless. Because it has no ikar. Right? The smoke is just vapor. It's just air. Right? There's no ikar there. But if you're smelling the ketoret itself, when it's not burning, then you do bless. Why? Because there is ikar. There is a source there. Right? That's something else. But if you burn it, The smoke, no ikar. So when we said, right, yesterday, that when you go outside the city, right, we're passing by a city, and you smell over there besamim, we're not talking about smoke, because there, as we said, right, you're not allowed to bless on that. So what are we talking about? You're blessing, you smell the trees. Right, that's something else. There is ikar there. Right, there's something there. There's a basis there. But something just smoke coming out of the city, no, we don't bless on that. Because there's no ikar, there's no source. So this is the rule regarding ketoret. Okay, number one. Number two, also, I want to tell you some interesting things about, gerim, converts. There are some interesting rules about converts. People who convert to Judaism. They say, right, the Chazal, that a person who converts to Judaism, he's like a newborn, he's born right at that moment when he converted. He's like a new person, He's a new neshama. Why is that? Because when he converts, they give him a new neshama, The old neshama that he had as a goy, that neshama is already not relevant. He gets a new neshama. So because of that, he's a newborn, like he was born today. That's why, if you ask a ger, right, a convert, when's your birthday? He should tell you the day that he converted, not the day he was born. You understand? The day he converted, that's his birthday. Because now he's something new. That's the rule when it comes to converts, right? Okay, so why do I tell you this? There's a reason why I tell you. There's also a reason in halakha. So what does that mean? Really, the truth is, once a person converts, he's a new person, right? He's not the old person anymore. So now the question is like this, right? Let's say his mother also converted, He converted and his mother converted. Or his sister. Right? Something like this, right? So now the question is, they both converted. Are they still related? According to halakha, they're not related anymore. That's it. Right? So according to halakha, his mother now is not related to him. You understand? Also his sister, right? Not related. This is the rule, you understand? So there's no relation between them. So what's a nafkamina? Nafkamina is that he's allowed to marry his mother, according to the Torah. You understand? He can marry her, because that's not his mother anymore. He's allowed to marry his sister, because that's not his sister anymore. This is you understand? According to the Torah. But what happened is, right, it says in Shulchan Aruch that the rabbis were gozer, that he shouldn't marry his mother. The rabbis decreed, Don't marry your mother. Don't marry any relative from your mother's side. What's the reason why? The rabbis were gozer. According to Torah, it's mutar. But the reason is because for the goy, right, he's not allowed to marry his mother, the goy. Right? Even the goy is not allowed to do that. Or to marry a relative from his mother. Relative that comes from the mother. So therefore, we don't want the goy to say, listen, when I was a goy, this was asur. Now I became a Jew, it's mutar? How can it be such a... So, it's like it creates like a pele, some kind of like a wonderment. How can it be, what? But I thought I was going to become on a higher level. I went to a lower level? The goy is going to say like this, you understand? It's going to be wondrous to him. So therefore, the rabbi said, you shouldn't marry your mother. You shouldn't marry any relative that comes from your mother, close relative. Like your sister, right? Let's say, from the mother's side. Because even a goy is not allowed to marry. So, right, the rabbis made some decrees like this, on the mother's side. On the father's side, they didn't make this decree. You're allowed to marry from the father's side, somebody, from your father's side. So let's say it's your half-sister, right? From your father's side, you're allowed to marry her, right? This is exactly what happened with Abraham, right? That Abraham, Sarah, right, was his relative from his father's side. So he married her, he was allowed to marry her, you understand? But if it was from his mother's side, he wouldn't be allowed to marry her. Sarah was related to him. Right? She was what? His niece, right? From the mother's side. So therefore, right, this is the reason why he was allowed to marry Sarah. So a goy is allowed to marry, right, the sister from his father's side, but not from his mother's side. This is the rule. So why do I tell you all this, right? There's a reason for it. Because somebody asked me, a friend of mine from South America, a nice guy, he asked me, what about if, right, let's say the father and son, they converted, right? The son converted, the father converted. As we said, right now, they're not related anymore, according to halakha, right? That's not your father, that's not your son anymore, according to halakha. Physically, yes. Physically, he's still, it's physical, right? DNA, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about the neshama. The neshama is not related. So why do I tell you this? Because the question is, right now, Let's say the son converted, right? Father converted. Can the father be, right, ed, witness, right, for his wedding, let's say, right, to be one of the edim, to be a witness, right? So this was the question that he asked me. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, Be'emet, that he's allowed, the father to be ed. Why? Because they're not related anymore, according to the Torah, and the rabbis did not decree on edut. So therefore, even the father can be ed for the son, right, when he gets married, or some other thing, whatever, right? Let's say he has to come and testify for him in the Bet Din, right? Let's say there's some kind of a court case. Right? So the rule is, in general, you're not allowed to testify, about your father, about your son, asur, because he's related to you. But here in this case, since they're not related anymore, it's mutar. They can testify about each other. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch.
All our souls are related.
Yeah, but that's like very distant. You know what I mean? When you have a distant relationship, it's not really, only close relative is asur. You understand?
Torah says we all came from one soul.
Of course, but there's no end to it, right? Everybody's your relative, according to this, right?
All was split with all the Jews. That's what it says.
But it's only the close relatives which are asur, to testify. So therefore, right, the rule is, if a ger, right, converts and his father, converted, they're not related, so he can testify, but they can testify about each other. Father got married, the son can be ed, right? The opposite way as well. They can be edim, one for the other, So this is the rule when it comes to gerim, that they can testify about one for another. I'll tell you another interesting question also with gerim. Somebody just texted me right now with this question when I was coming to the shul. Another question about gerim, which is like this. Usually, right, what happens is like this. Let's say sometimes, a family comes to convert, right? Husband, wife, and children. It happens many times like this, The whole family wants to convert. But the children are not yet bar mitzvah, They're still young. 5 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. Not bar mitzvah. So what's the rule, what do we do with these children? So the rule is, that if the mother wants to convert them, the young children, we convert all of them. Even though they're young, they're too young to decide themselves. They're just children, They don't have any dot. They don't have any intellect. So the rule is, that the mother wants to convert them, we'd say, yalla, everybody in the mikveh. Puch. Right? One after the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like this, Jump in. So, but here's the thing, right? Since they're not yet bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, these children, right? So what they have to do is, once they become bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, we have to ask them now, do you want to be Jewish? You interested? Because now, it's time to decide. They have to decide again. Because when they were children, they didn't really decide for themselves. They don't have any intellect. They don't have any dot. So now, when they become bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, we ask them right now, you want to be Jewish? You want to? If they want to, that's it, they're Jewish, right? If they say yes. If they say no, that's it, he's a goy. Right? This is the rule, Very interesting rule like this. But here's the thing, right? There's also another way that it can be done. It says in Shulchan Aruch like this, Let's say, for instance, right, the kid just became bar mitzvah. So, as we said, right, we still didn't ask him yet if you're interested in to be a Jew or not. But you know what he did? He put on tefillin. He niach tefillin. So there, we don't have to ask him anymore. Why? Because since he did a mitzvah, one of the mitzvot, that's it, he's Jewish already. That means that he wants. You understand? The fact that he did the mitzvah is enough already. So let's say he did any mitzvah, like any of the mitzvot, or some kind of minhag. He did, right? He did slichot. We're coming up to slichot now, right? Bezrat Hashem. Next week. He did slichot. Okay, so you're Jewish, that's it, right? You did Jewish minhag. So that shows that but we don't have to ask you anymore. So this is the rule, that if the ger, right, the child, right, who grew up, does some kind of a Jewish minhag, you don't need to ask him anymore. That means he wants to be Jewish. Right? There's nothing to ask. But if he didn't do nothing yet, right, so then we do ask him, right? We tell him, Yeah, what do you think?
He put the tefillin. Automatically he's converted.
He already converted, like 5 years ago, right? But now, this means that he really wants it,
So,
he wants. Right? That shows now that he wants it. So that mikveh that he did, 5 years ago, now kicks in, and becomes active. Right? That's the way it works, So, right, this is exactly what we saw, with, I'll tell you the story, we'll finish here. there was the story of Ruth and Orpah, right? That we read on Shavuot, right? Sefer Ruth. So over there, what happened, right? That they went to Moab. There was no, right? That they converted them there, but the problem is that they were related, Machlon, Kilion, Elimelech, they're all relatives. So this Bet Din was not really kosher. You understand? When they converted them. So when they came back to Israel, they had to convert them again because this conversion was treif, not kosher. Right? You understand? So they had to do it again. This was like a bediavad, bediavad shel bediavad conversion. Understand? This is the reason why they had to do it again. So what happened was, now, right, when Naomi wants to go back now to Eretz Israel, right, because the husband died, right, children died, everybody died, so she wants to go back. So what happened, right? Ruth and Orpah wanted to go back with her, Right? They said, we're coming with you, yalla! Ah! Right? So, but you know what she did, right? She tried to discourage them. That's what you have to do with a ger, Try to discourage them a little bit. So he told them, are you really sure, listen, it's not going to be so easy for you coming over here with me. I got nothing, I got no children, I got no husband, I got nothing, I have no family. I'm going there, I got no money, I'm going there a poor woman. Got nothing left. Lost everything. Lost my shirt. He's telling them, right? So what happened, right? In the end, Ruth, stayed with her. But, right, Orpah, she didn't stay. She went back to be a Goya. Understand? So same thing also happened over there, that she decided that she doesn't want to go, to convert. So they let her go, she went back. So you know what they say, right? The funny thing is that who came from Ruth, right? David HaMelech, right? Who came from Orpah? Goliath, right? And Goliath was the enemy of the Jews, Pelishtim. Right? He came from, so can you imagine, she went back to the Tumah, she went to Kedusha, and then two enemies, came out from there. David and Goliath. So what happened, right? David came and killed Goliath. The Kedusha overpowered the Tumah. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen, Amen. לפיכך שאומר, זה הקדוש ברוך הוא לצדוק לישראל, לפיכך חיבר להם תורה ומצוות, שאומר אדוני חפש, למען צדקו יגדיר תורה וידיר.